Good morning again. Once again, hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar with the Pet Sustainability Coalition. My name is Melissa Bauer, and I am the Director of Sustainability here at PSC, and I am so excited for our content today. So we're going to dive in. Just a couple of disclaimers. As I mentioned right at the top of the hour, we've got members of my team hanging out in the chat. If you have any questions or technical difficulties, please let us know. Also, we'll be taking questions there and answering them at the end. And make sure that you're just kind of introducing us and let us know where you're calling in from today. So a little bit of housekeeping. All attendees have been put on mute with your video turned off, and it will stay that way for the rest of our webinar. But as I mentioned, please feel free to be dropping questions in the chat, or you also have a Q&A function, or you can be dropping questions the whole piece of content, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. Also, everybody on the webinar today will be receiving a copy of the slides and the recording. So we want to make sure that you get as much out of this content as possible. And if you have any questions or technical difficulties, make sure to drop us a note in that chat function, and a member of our team will help you out. So a brief introduction. We are the Pet Sustainability Coalition. We work with almost 175 different companies from all over the pet supply chain, everyone from suppliers to manufacturers, distributors, brands, retailers. We're also a global organization. We have about 60% of our membership in North America, another 30% of our membership in Europe, and we're also growing really fast in Australia and Asia as well. We serve a dual function, so we work with individual members to help measure, improve, and celebrate their individual sustainability performance based on and tailored to their specific business culture and goals. But we also work to bring the industry and different sectors of the pet industry together to address large-scale environmental issues too large to solve for a single company. So if you've never been to one of our webinars before, we have a wide variety of topics addressing this dual mission. One of the ways in which we serve our members is we have a very robust toolkit. If you've never checked it out, I strongly recommend. We have dozens and dozens of tools in a variety of different topic areas that you'll see at the bottom. And today I'm really excited to focus in on one particular topic, which is supply chain. We've got a couple of great speakers, and I know that this is a growing area that many pet companies are working on, especially in the time of COVID, which has really kind of heightened supply chain issues. So I'm really excited to introduce you and hand it over to our two guest speakers today. We have Katerina, who's joining us from Sedex, and really excited to hear about the supply chain work that they're doing. And also Zach will be joining us from Wellpet to give their perspective on this conversation. So Katerina, good morning, actually good evening from the UK. Thanks so much for joining us. Are you still there?
My pleasure, thank you for having me. I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great.
So let me.
Perfect. If you can just let me know once you're able to see my PowerPoint.
I can see you and your slides. So take it away, Karen. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa. Hi, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're calling in from. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Katerina Paraskeva. I'm part of the business development team at Sedex. So today we'll be looking at an introduction to supply chain transparency. So the main topics that we'll be covering today are: what is supply chain transparency? Why is it important? What are the benefits? How is COVID-19 affecting supply chains? Achieving supply chain transparency with Sedex, and we will then finish with a summary. So to start with, what is supply chain transparency? So supply chain transparency is when a company knows the full extent of their supply chain all the way from the raw materials and harvesting through to the transport of goods and the finalized products and services in the forms that they are provided to their customers. The ultimate objective is for buyers to be aware of every single supplier in the supply chain and hold key information on them. This includes where all the suppliers throughout the supply chain are located, including both indirect and direct suppliers. And this will allow you to identify key areas of risk for human and environmental rights at a country, product, and industry level. So next we will look at why is this important. So supply chain transparency is a foundation of a responsible sourcing program. It allows companies to both identify, mitigate, and also prevent risks within their supply chain, as well as ensuring that they are also complying with legislation. Research shows that consumers and investors expect companies to know exactly where and how their products are sourced and where their services are coming from. This includes understanding who is producing component parts, the finished goods, or the products that facilitate a service. By gathering this information about their suppliers, companies are able to achieve supply chain transparency and understand the risks within their supply chain. This activity is known as supply chain mapping. So what are the benefits of supply chain transparency? Supply chain transparency will allow you to identify and understand the inherent risks within your supply chain. This will allow you to protect your operations and your reputation against them and make informed business decisions to limit these risks. An example of this is that some countries have higher rates of exploitative practices like child labour and are therefore higher risk to source from these particular areas. In addition to this, it will enable you to make informed business decisions and prevent risks by using this insight. By having this extra information on suppliers and your workers, businesses can understand the human rights and the environmental risks that their decisions may have throughout their entire supply chain. You can then take action and solve issues and protect workers. And finally, environment, social, and governance criteria, commonly referred to as ESG, are of increasing interest to investors, as investors are keen to understand the potential environmental and social risks of an investment prospect. Doing supply chain mapping is key to reassuring investors that businesses understand their supply chains and have true visibility of the risks within them. So what happens if you don't have supply chain transparency? So for now, I'm going to give you an example of a company in the UK that had a crisis a couple of years ago after some issues happened within their supply chain that they weren't aware of. So in 2018, KFC, a chicken producer in the UK, switched their logistics supplier from Bidvest to DHL without having a full understanding of the risks associated with this decision. DHL decided to distribute to the entire UK from only one singular warehouse, which caused a crisis when, due to a traffic accident, lorries were unable to reach that one warehouse and were therefore unable to deliver ingredients to the outlets. As a result of this, over 600 KFC outlets were closed for the best part of a week, with turnover falling 73% and a loss of over £230 million in the financial year between 2017 and 2018. In addition to this, the post-incident revenue figures did not return to the pre-incident figures even the following year, with same-store sales declining 6.8% year on year. So next we will be looking at how COVID-19 is impacting supply chains. So whilst I'm sure that most of you are fairly tired of hearing about COVID-19 at this point, it is nonetheless very important to recognize that over the last year, the global economy and supply chains have been affected to a huge degree. Sedex research has actually shown that over a third of businesses are experiencing decreased demand, which has knock-on effects for the workers at these sites. In addition, 34% of businesses have increased worker overtime in order to manage these labour shortages due to sickness, which is likely to result in excessive working hours. Okay, so what can we do about this? We can ensure that we are working closely with suppliers and that we identify and mitigate any risk within our supply chain. Actually, in a report that was published by an accountancy firm, BDO, a survey of 100 CFOs in the US manufacturing sector found that supply chain transparency and stability was the most important factor in overcoming the pandemic impact. As a result of the pandemic and the resulting obstacles, such as tariffs and trade sanctions, CFOs have decided the biggest focus for resiliency investments in 2021 will be the supply chain. As such, the focus has gone from crisis management to strengthening supply chains, with 52% planning to invest in supply chain technology in the coming year and 25% planning to conduct a supply chain assessment. So the next area that we'll be looking at is how Sedex can help with achieving supply chain transparency. So who are we? For anybody that is not familiar with Sedex, we are a membership organization that initially started in the UK and has expanded globally. Over the last 16 years, we've accrued over 60,000 members, 1,000 of which are our buyer members and the remainder are supplier members. We work with the world's largest brands, such as Nestle, Mondelez, Kellogg's, and Kingfisher, and we span across 37 different industry sectors. In addition to this, Sedex owns an audit methodology, which is called SMETA and is globally the most commonly used audit. So how can we help to support your business? By using Sedex, you will be able to map your supply chain and create transparency. We also help you to identify, track, and understand the risks within your supply chain. And we enable you to manage your business reputation and create a resilient supply chain. So I'd like to give a brief overview of a few of the tools that we can offer you with a Sedex membership. And I'll also invite Zach from Wellpet to give his experience of some of these tools. So Sedex begins with the self-assessment questionnaire. We provide a self-assessment questionnaire through our platform to our suppliers so that they can complete the questionnaire and then share it with all of their customers that are on the Sedex platform. In order to complete the self-assessment questionnaire, the suppliers need to be registered through Sedex, and we offer onboarding programs for suppliers in order to achieve this. Zach, I believe that you have had experience with onboarding suppliers to Sedex, so it'd be great if you can discuss your experience with this.
Absolutely. So back in 2016, we made a decision to take a look at our supply chain with a primary focus on suppliers and partners outside of the U.S., as much of our supply chain remained in North America. So we engaged with Sedex and did the onboarding project with the team there, getting weekly updates as they created communications to our vendors, and worked with them to basically get set up within the system. And the good thing about that was that they did work with me very regularly. We had pretty much twice a week calls to discuss, and then an end of the week recap of where we lay. So our vendors, we were able to get, I think it was upwards of 80% registered with Sedex at the time. And overall, it was a very well received and smooth process, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you, Zach. Great. So after completing the self-assessment questionnaire, the next area that we advise buyer looks at is inherent risk. So we have a risk assessment tool called Radar, and this gives you risk scores based on country, sector, and product area. And it also incorporates publicly available information, such as articles, journal extracts, and so on. By using this tool in conjunction with the self-assessment questionnaire, you can then have a really key idea of what the risk is associated with each of your suppliers and their sites. Again, Zach, I'd like to invite you to discuss your experience, as I know you've mentioned you have used Radar yourself.
Yes, so you'll be touching on, I see, the e-learning side of things, but we did some training with Radar, which replaced, I believe, the original risk assessment tool. And the thing that really appealed to our team was the visual aids that gave Radar. So we were able to look in and see basically a map of the world, and by color coordination, a quick overview of what the inherent risks were for a country, and then drill down into different areas. And I've gone in and looked at different commodities, different concerns, and things along those lines that are specific to the food and manufacturing industries, even though it touches a lot more of other stuff that I haven't even been able to dabble in just yet. So it's been very impressive, visually stunning.
Great. Yeah, the visuals are amazing for Radar. Perfect, thanks, Zach. And great, so then the next point would be, you've done the self-assessment questionnaire, you've looked at it in conjunction with Radar, you have the scores for your suppliers. If you have then decided that for your company, the supplier is too high risk, we would suggest that you audit them. So we allow both first, second, and third party audits to be uploaded onto the platform. And then you can access all of the data from these audits through Sedex Advanced. In response to the pandemic, we also did launch a virtual assessment, and this allows buyers to have a virtual audit, which is basically an audit that they can use as opposed to a traditional audit in order to ascertain what is happening at the site. In addition to this, we would then suggest that you use Sedex Analytics, which is our reporting tool. So Sedex Analytics pulls all of the information from the self-assessment questionnaire, the risk assessment tool, and the auditing. It looks at non-compliances and various different overviews of your supply chain. So this is what you would be using on a day-to-day basis to keep on top of what is happening at each of your supplier sites. And then finally, we offer an e-learning platform, which Zach, you have referenced. This has a variety of different CSR modules and also Sedex training modules as well. So you can learn how to use all the different tools, or you can learn about the various different CSR topics, such as forced labor, child labor, health and safety, various different environmental modules, and so on. So you can use these yourself as a business, and you can also actually refer your suppliers to modules too, to ensure that they are continuously improving and you're getting to the bottom of any risk that is happening within your supply chain. Zach, you mentioned that you have used the e-learning. I don't know if you have anything to add to your experience with that.
Oh yeah, I think over the years I've almost hit maybe a dozen different webinars and e-learning sessions with Sedex. So we're very familiar with that process and just signing up and sitting in. And I think I found the most benefit is as Sedex has been updating the processes and different capabilities, definitely keeps me up to date. Particularly the biggest change with like Radar, for instance, since we've already talked about that, was it was such a stark contrast from the previous risk assessment that I would have completely missed it, basically. And very happy to get both those notices and then the training on it. So the team has been fantastic.
Perfect, glad to hear it. And also, as Zach mentioned, in addition to the modules, we do have the webinars as well. So we continuously host webinars, providing various training on topics, as Zach mentioned. And we also have various webinars around topics as well. So sort of like this one, we've had previous webinars in the past around COVID and responding to supply chains in the pandemic and that sort of thing, which can be really beneficial to attend to and see the questions that are coming up from suppliers and other buyers as well. Great. So then to summarize what we have covered today, supply chain transparency is important for several different reasons. And I've outlined a few of those just to recap below. So having supply chain transparency provides assurance to both investors and consumers that any potential issues are being spotted and they're being fixed in a timely manner. It also protects workers and helps to drive continuous improvement in working conditions, as well as highlight any areas of concern. It will allow you to make informed business decisions and to minimize the risk. and it will also ensure compliance with legislation. In terms of getting started from Sedex's point of view, what we would recommend is to begin gathering information on your suppliers, however you'd like to do that, and also to start identifying your high-risk sites. This will then give you the extra information and detail to decide who you need to target from your supply chain in terms of ensuring that they're improving and reducing any risks, such as child labor, forced labor, environmental risks, and so on. So if you'd like to learn any more, feel free to contact me on the email address below. I'm happy to discuss it on a one-to-one basis. That's where the true value comes in terms of what we can offer to help with that. So feel free to get in touch on the email below. For the time being, I'll be handing over to Zach from Wellpet so that he can give an overview of how he's been using Sedex and also what they have been doing in response to the pandemic and so on over the last year. Thank you. Zach, you need to unmute.
Thought I did. Sorry about that. I hate being that person, and here I am. Can everybody see this okay? I'm hoping I shared the right part of my screen. Fantastic. So as previously mentioned, my name is Zach Wallace, procurement manager for Wellpet. And we've been working, with Sedex for, I stated we did an onboarding project in 2016, but between that relationship and where we are pretty much today after 2020, I think we can just talk about real quick some of the challenges, at least that I consider in the raw material world and what we kind of all deal with in varying degrees. As you can tell, it's a little different than my picture down there. Figured I'd rock the COVID beard this year, I guess. So some of the challenges that we all may be familiar with, or to some extent, one way or another, I've highlighted here, starting with the supplier engagement, where in responsible sourcing, we may be dealing with different industries, different supplier capabilities from a large corporation to mom and pops. The volume that you buy from a supplier and the regional world that they are in are just some examples that can lead to a challenge, perhaps, in creating a responsible sourcing program or feeling comfortable with your sourcing strategy. Raw material availability can impact, as well as just the logistics behind that raw material. 2020 really highlighted this area in that maybe there was no product available and you had to come up with other options, or maybe their product was available, but the supply chain has changed because of one reason or another in getting material from one part of the world to you. Just how do you find sources that can continuously check those boxes, and what do you do? Additionally, there's inherent risk, as Katerina mentioned, in various supply chains, various countries, various regions of the world. And not all countries have these same laws or conditions. Even ones that you would consider to be a safe location may have something inherent to the product itself. So how do you identify and monitor these kind of risks? Another thing that is very pertinent when you're looking at your supply chain is how far upstream do you have visibility, and how far do you want to have visibility upstream? Do you stop with the broker level? Do you go down to the farm level? And this is a very much internal kind of discussion to have as you're going through your sourcing of raw materials, or really anything when it comes down to it. And then another area being your understanding of sustainability and responsible sourcing, and how they go a little bit hand in hand. This is something that I can say I've personally developed over at least the past 18 months or so, where sustainability and responsible sourcing really have an overlap that previously I did not really consider, outside of one thing being about going green, perhaps, and then the other side just being about having fair labor laws and the like. And then the final one, at least for my considerations, and like I said, there are probably more, are customer and consumer expectations. So we have some folks on the call that may be a customer of Wellpet, for instance, and how do we make sure that we're meeting their expectations as they're trying to meet the consumer expectations, and where do we go from there? So I'm going to say a little bit about what we do, or what we can consider, at least, as we're moving through these areas. And so for supplier engagement and activity, it's really just about having those conversations and being proactive to work with suppliers. What can they do and what will they be able to do? This was something that we did with Sedex in the onboarding process. We had a communication to them, a variety of vendors and co-manufacturer partners. Sedex had that communication as well. We worked through and ended up with a pretty solid onboarding process, I would say. For the raw material side of things, this may seem pretty common knowledge for people in the supply chain world, but you want to make sure you have contingencies in diversifying your portfolio. Think about things that could happen, so that you're not scrambling to try to maybe sacrifice your production for your policies, or vice versa, which 2020 really highlighted exactly how prepared you really are. Moving on to the identifying and monitoring in particular. So we may be cognizant of the risks in a region, but how do we keep track of those risks besides just watching the news for every little tidbit? There are tools, and so today we're highlighting Sedex, for instance, and Sedex allows us to or assist in the data collection and then further analysis, so that we can really focus our efforts. And I mentioned this when I said visibility upstream in the supply chain. It comes with the communication and overall data collection, how far up you want to go, and then how far you can go. Traceability is definitely something that's becoming more of a topic, and we are getting consumer queries about this as well, and fortunately are able to address these kind of things. Looking at best practices and resources for understanding what sustainability and the overlaps for responsible sourcing, you can look at the UN for the Sustainability Development Goals, B Corp, the PSC, for instance, in providing these kind of resources. There are plenty of ways to look at this and educate yourself, but that's really the most important thing. And then overall, maintaining open lines of communication with your customer and overall your consumer expectations, so that as these develop, you're able to develop internally as well. And so centrally, the theme is communication. The consumer tends to drive, obviously, the markets, and the customer, who we would work with, will be able to convey that, as well as our consumer affairs team. So having these lines open allow us to, have the right policies, have the right frame of mind, and then know where we can direct our efforts. Another thing that's helpful, in a quick shout out, is to our team tomorrow, which is our sustainability team that's at Wellpet. We formed a cross-functional group so that we can have that conversation internally as well. We're able to, pull from everybody's every day-to-day, as well as their respective teams that they work towards. So I represent operations, for instance. We have people within our R&D group, we have folks within IT, and then our site level. And all of these are helping to round out where we currently are and where we want to be. And I highly encourage anybody on the phone to, if they don't already have a team or a group of like-minded individuals like this, to try to pull something together, because having that in front of you as a company, and really that presence, definitely keeps that, I guess, in the culture of the company. And very happy to be part of this team at Wellpet. So I think, real quickly, just my overall remarks for this is in regards to teamwork and communication. Whether you're at one end of the supply chain stream or the other, top to bottom, as long as there's a communication around this, you'll be able to understand, exactly what is expected and what can be done. Nothing's done overnight, and it requires a lot of teamwork and effort. And for instance, calls that we're doing right now, working with Katerina and her team on the Sedex side of things, and then of course Melissa and the PSC folks, to pretty much just get where we are right now. So I would just like to say, thank you for having the conversation, and I'm sure there are plenty of questions. So I think I can turn that back over to Melissa, and everybody just, be happy and healthy out there.
Yes. Thank you so much, Zach and Katerina. Zach, there we go. We got
Yep.
everybody back. That was a great presentation from you guys. So thank you both so much. We have a lot of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So everybody who's on the call, shoot us what questions you have, but I am happy to kick it off. So I think this is a question more for Katerina, but we've got a couple different questions around does Sedex make sense for kind of a small to medium company that maybe doesn't, have a full green team like Zach does, or, have an entire operations department? Is there still opportunities for smaller, medium-sized companies to use your tools?
Absolutely. Is the short answer to that. Actually, a lot of the people that join us, they are small, medium businesses. What happens quite a lot is you may have like the huge companies such as Kingfisher, and they will then onboard people as suppliers. And actually, more often than not, those suppliers then actually choose to become buyer supplier members, which is what we refer to them as on the platform. And because they want to then start beginning to manage their own supply chain and managing their supplies and risks as well. So in terms of the size, we have some companies that have literally 5 or 6 suppliers on board on the platform, and they're managing them through Sedex. And of course, it goes all the way up through to the thousands. So there's no limitations on size.
Great, thanks. So Katerina, we've got a couple different questions. We've got a lot of suppliers as members of PSC, so I'm going to try and combine a couple different questions into one. But how can a supplier use Sedex? Can they use it as a way to identify brands, or what happens? Can you talk to them like Zach, you were saying you asked your suppliers to join Sedex? So can you talk us kind of like what that would look like?
Yeah, of course. So suppliers will join Sedex as a supplier member, of course, and they will be able to complete the self-assessment questionnaire. So the self-assessment questionnaire is very comprehensive, and it will filter it out depending on the industry sector the supplier belongs to. So for example, the full self-assessment questionnaire is 250 questions, but if it was a small supplier working on a potato farm, they would be asked around 60 to 70. So it'll filter it out accordingly. They will then have a report that identifies the areas that they have done well in, the areas they need to improve in, and also benchmarking them against other suppliers within those particular areas. So these are very new reports that have been launched through Radar literally over the last few months. In addition to that, they will have access to the e-learning platform that both Zach and I had referenced. So the variety of different modules that they can use to develop their knowledge in key areas, and also to learn about the different Sedex tools as well. And then finally, they can opt into a member directory. So buyers can actually search through this member directory to find new suppliers. So they can choose what sector they belong to, the location, and so on. And then it will give them a list of those suppliers. So if you opt, obviously, to be included in that, you can potentially get new business from buyers on the Sedex platform.
And if I may as well, there's different kinds, Katerina, of the memberships. You kind of, said that the members, the buyer, the suppliers, the buyers. And then, for instance, like people like Wellpet, where we're right in between for a supplier and then a customer, we have that kind of membership that we're part of. And even then, the membership fees are tiered as well.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I saw, a question around the pricing. The pricing is dependent, as Zach said, it's tiered on annual revenue. So it starts, for example, at less than £10 million. If your revenue is less than £10 million, it starts at £2,700 as your annual membership fee, and then it goes from there. And for suppliers, it's £100 per site per year if anybody is interested. But if you want a specific price quote, then feel free to email me and I can send that over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Zach, I love this question for you. And we've had many discussions that I think Team Tomorrow is the coolest name for a green team.
It was a heavy debate too.
I can imagine. So we have a question for you. Does your team tomorrow have dedicated management approved time for participating in this, or are you guys doing this as a volunteer to just kind of in between all the rest of your duties?
So it's kind of like a combination. I wouldn't be able to probably accurately describe it, but we have dedicated time set aside for our team to meet. All the members were nominated by various members of their team, from SLT, our leadership team down. So the nominations, were made. Team Tomorrow was basically formed, and in that regard, it kind of was a volunteer basis in a way. But everybody that's participating in it, we have regular bi-weekly calls and work in between, and then informal discussions as well. So it's kind of hard to quantify our total efforts between projects and everything, but it is a pretty regular occurrence. And definitely the participants pretty much live and breathe the sustainability definition every day, both personally and professionally.
Yes, I know just from experience, we got a couple of your teammates on this call. So
yes, and I hope I represented them well for it.
Huge shout out to you guys. So this is a question for, I guess, kind of both of you. So one of the recommendations and things that we talk to the most with our members at PSC is implementing a supply chain code of conduct. Can you talk about how that process and a supply chain code of conduct would factor into Sedex work, both within the platform or maybe externally as well? Can they be kind of worked together?
Yeah, so from a Sedex point of view, you can host code of conduct through our platform. So if you have a code of conduct, you're able to host that through our website so that all the information is then stored in conjunction with all the rest of the data on the platform. Or if you don't currently have a code of conduct and you're looking to develop one and maybe don't have the expertise internally, we can also help you to create a code of conduct as well. So yeah, not sure if you have anything to add, Zach, to that.
No, that's something that we're in the process of as well. So our account representative, Hannah, that works with Katerina, and I have regular calls with other members of our team tomorrow as well. And that has been something that we're focusing on, and have some resources, from Sedex, for examples and such. So we'll be working towards that.
Perfect. So I'm going to try and get a couple more questions. I think we've got time for 2 more. So I'll do one more for each of you. So Zach, you were talking about, in your case, you're asking for traceabilities from your vendors, but have you on the other side been asked from your consumers for traceability as well?
I'm probably not going to speak very well to this, but I know that our QA team is very heavily involved with, traceability, at least from our facility straight down to theirs. And then we're working, some of our vendors have been making great strides as well in their own programs and platforms. There's a lot of development in terms of traceability from the raw materials side of things. And I think that's definitely going to be something that improves over time. So it's kind of a mixed bag right now. But from our perspective, in regards to our own products and everything, we have a pretty robust traceability platform.
Perfect. And one last kind of a technical question for you, Katerina. How is your radar tool calculated? How is the data calculated, and how is that kept up to date?
So the radar tool is provided by a third party actually called Anthesis, and they work, the company is based on determining inherent risk. In terms of the actual calculations, there's literally hundreds of them, so I probably wouldn't be able to give you them all now. But as I mentioned, it's based on 3 key areas. So it's based on country, product area, and the industry sector. So that's the data that is looked at. We also have a brand new sourcing tool. So it actually shows you the information that it came from, the sources that the information came from. So you can get direct links to articles, journal entries, that sort of thing. That has been included. Also on Anthesis's website, they have a full breakdown of exactly how they actually calculate the risk and so on. So again, if you want links to that, let me know.
Perfect. Well, we still have lots of questions we didn't get to. So if you have a question that you didn't get to, please email it to me, and I will try and track down that answer for you. Just a quick way to follow up, and continue the conversation. So this has been a great conversation about supply chain, but as I mentioned, here at PSC, we focus on a wide variety of topics. And with that in mind, in February, we're putting a huge emphasis on packaging. So we have the first ever 2-day summit dedicated specifically to packaging in the, excuse me, dedicated specifically to packaging in the pet industry. So I would absolutely invite you all to come be a part of that conversation. We have free tickets that just include exhibit hall and keynotes, but there's going to be lots and lots of interesting content. So invite you all to that, and I will include that link in the follow-up. But I just want to say thank you all for joining us today for this, what has been a fantastic and really engaging conversation. Thank you once again to Katerina and Zach for joining us and sharing your wisdom with us. And stay tuned. We do this webinar series once a month on a wide variety of topics. So if you have something specific you'd like to hear from us, I'd like us to provide some education on, please let us know, and you can check out all of our previous webinars on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining us, and everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having us, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Katerina.
Thanks, Zach. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.